So when I was 14, I decided I wanted to join the wrestling team,
Okay.
and I was very shy, and I was a little girl, and there was no girls on the team. So the first day I showed up at practice, like I was terrified, and like the one of the scariest things I mean, I still remember how I felt to this day, like taking that first step onto the mat and like being like, I can do this. And it's an incredibly hard sport.
Yeah.
It's a very physically hard sport. And so that taught me that I could do hard things,
Right.
that I could do, and I've used that throughout the rest of my life. If you could take this, you could do this one hard thing, you could do the next hard thing.
Do you love science fiction and fantasy books? You found yourself in the right dimension. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse, where each week I talk to science fiction and fantasy authors about myth, magic, and the infinite possibilities of storytelling. I'm your host, Herman Stuernagel, and I will be taking you on a journey with some of your favorite authors, helping you to get to know them and possibly uncover some new literary gems along the way. Ready to explore? Because on this show, every conversation is a doorway into a different world. Welcome to the greatest podcast in the multiverse. I am super excited to have a very special guest today, Amber Toro. Welcome here today, Amber.
Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Amber, I kind of found you through social media. You've been really active on Twitter and Instagram, and your cover for your upcoming book, Umbra, really caught my eye. And especially, you've made the comparison to Red Rising. That's one of my favorite books and one of the comparables to my book as well. So I definitely wanted to chat with you a bit about that and yeah, your writing journey. So why don't you kick us off and just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got started with writing?
Sure. I'm Amber Toro. I am a data scientist, and Umbra is my debut novel. It's an adult sci-fi novel. How I got started in writing, I actually always wanted to write since I was a little kid. Probably like the first thing I wrote was probably like a fanfic of Doom 2, if you remember that PC game.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like I wrote through my childhood. As an adult, I wrote some, but it was for blogs,
Okay,
for work, right? It was not
right.
fun. And then a couple years ago, I had the idea for the Ascension Stars trilogy, but I was too busy and didn't make it a priority. And 2 years ago, my dad passed away,
Oh,
and it made me think about what I wanted to do
yeah.
and what I'd regret not getting to.
Hmm.
And I wanted to write this book.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's how I actually sat down and made time for it and wrote my first novel.
yeah. Well, good for you. Yeah, though, my dad passed away. It was about 10 years ago now, and I definitely had some of those moments too. Like, what am I doing with my life, and and what do I
Yeah.
need to do to change that? Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, other than the fanfic for Doom, had you written at all, like as well in high school and that sort of thing, and put it to the side, or had it just been something that you just
Yeah.
hadn't gotten to? Yeah,
Yeah, I wrote through high school. I took creative writing in college and, all that. But,
right.
then you have kids and a career and yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't circle back to it for a while.
totally. Yeah. And so, what's the why behind your writing? Why is storytelling important to you?
Yeah, I really like the creative exploration. I'm a data scientist, and so I really like to understand like the why behind how things work. And a
Mm,
lot of my writing is that way. I like to explore what the future might be like, how different cultures might interact, just, really exploring those whys is what I like to do with my writing.
yeah, really cool. Yeah, and I'd like to delve a little bit more into your role as a data scientist, if you don't mind. I know in your bio you talk a little bit about machine learning and that aspect of things. What got you interested in that aspect of the sciences? And yeah, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I've always been a science nerd. I grew up making the rockets and the chemistry kit, and I always liked science.
Cool.
And when I got older, I thought I'd really enjoy coding, which I do, and I thought data was really interesting. So it's just kind of those things all came together, and I think data science is really interesting. You get to answer questions that you can't without the help of machine learning, and I think that's really fun.
Cool. And so what kind of like are you building apps, or what kind of programs are you what I guess what exactly is
Yeah.
involved in with that?
So at my current company, we're a machine learning SaaS, and so we are building an application for enrollment counselors. So we build machine learning models to help identify where applicants are at in their student journey.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And so, how much of a role does your background in the data sciences play into your writing?
So the actual inspiration for the world that Umbra is set in is from my work. So the idea was based on if we had fully sentient general AI and they were individuals, and this is a concept that is pretty common, I think, in the space. The idea being that if you have individuals, they'll be mostly good. You'll have some that are bad, but that's how you prevent something like Skynet or the Matrix, is that you have AIs that are powerful enough to do the right thing and stand up for humanity.
Hmm.
And in this world, I wanted to think about the idea of what if AIs wanted to experience life as their creators do? And
Hmm.
so they were bonded with a human. And so in Umbra, there are fully sentient starships that are bonded with their human hosts.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the relationship there. So I guess let's pivot a little bit more. We're gonna jump around in the questions here, but tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
Umbra, just so we get a sense of what's all about. I know that's a piece of it, but I know there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. So the quick blurb is that it is a space opera. It has enemies to lovers, slow burn romance. It's told from three point of views with fully sentient starships, a militaristic society, and a signal in the darkness that threatens to destroy humanity.
Cool.
So it is, yeah, it's an adventure story. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I saw, and like I mentioned, and kind of in the intro there, you compared it to kind of like a Red Rising
Yeah.
meets Battlestar Galactica. Um, is that there's not a lot of writings that are compared to Red Rising out there? Is that more the kind of the militaristic part of the story?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably two elements. So, there is the classism in Red Rising. Instead, we have tribalism. So there's 12 tribes that left Earth that was. And so the loyalty is to the tribe first, even though right now it's at about 100 years after the founding of the United Tribal Access. So there is a united humanity, but there's a lot of political tension, a lot of people kind of playing their own pieces to take their parts of the galaxy. So part of it is that the kind of division of humanity, and then yeah, the militaristic society. There's sword fights and there's starship battles and all of the fun action stuff.
Yeah, right on. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. So I want to step back just a little bit to your actual writing process, because I know you're busy. I know you're working for this startup, and I know you've got kids and all that. How do you find time to write, and what does your writing process currently look like?
Yeah, I look at it really about consistency. So I also cycle, which I know that is on your list also,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing. I feel like the way that if you show up and you work towards it every day, you're going to get there. And sometimes that is something really small, like 15, 20 minutes, and sometimes it's something bigger. But for me, I really focus on flexibility and consistency.
Okay.
And so, like, I don't have a time of day that I write. I
Okay.
prefer in the evening because I find it relaxing.
Cool.
But if it's going to be a crazy day, maybe I write real quick at lunch. So I
Okay.
just find spaces to put
Those
it.
moments that you're able to fit
Yeah.
it into. Yeah. Like I found for myself, because I do website design, so I find that I was trying to write in the evenings, but my brain was just too tired to do it. So I had to start, first thing in the morning. So I get up at like 5 o'clock and do it before
Yeah.
work. I know with kids that makes it a lot more tricky to do that. Um, but yeah, so that you're just sneaking in kind of the 15-20 minute increments when you can. Hey?
Yeah. I mean, I've tried the early morning thing, and until my caffeine kicks in, I'm like
Mm-hmm.
too slow. Like,
Okay.
I like get frustrated.
Yeah.
So I have to at least have my caffeine going.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Totally understandable there. Yeah, it usually takes
Yeah.
me that first 15 or 20 minutes for the coffee to get made and to start sinking in, right?
Yeah.
And so how about other authors? What authors have inspired you?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as works that I really enjoy, obviously we mentioned Red Rising. That is a favorite of mine also. I really like Brandon Sanderson's Skyward series. I
Oh,
thought
cool.
that one was great.
Hmm.
And then actually, like on a personal level, Haley Reese Chow, she wrote Into the Churn,
Okay.
and she super inspired me because she's an indie author who is an engineer and a mom and an endurance athlete. And when I just watched her on Instagram, I was like, she can do it. Like,
Hmm.
that means I could do it too.
Absolutely.
So I found that really inspiring.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I it's inspiring. I sometimes find that frustrating when I see the amount the amount that people are capable of doing. But it is when you take a look at people that are doing exactly what you want to do, and they've got the day job, and and I mean, I'm amazed with writers that have kids at any level, because I don't have kids and I still have a hard time fitting in the words every day, right? So
Still busy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that to add kids on top of the equation, like I'm always super impressed when writers are able to get to get their works out.
They're also super inspiring. Like, my kids are probably my biggest fan, even though like this book is not for them. It is adult and it is violent. But every time I get a proof copy, they're like, "Where's my copy?"
That's awesome.
So I always have to order three.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
cool.
So yeah.
Yeah. Were there any other works that inspired you to start in science fiction, maybe even from a younger age or anything like that? Like, when did you start getting
Yeah.
interested in science fiction?
So my favorite science fiction when I was growing up was Ender's Game.
Yeah.
That one's a classic. So I
Yeah.
really loved that one. And more recently, I read the Dune series, which also got me thinking where I was like, Frank Herbert passed away before I was born. And I'm reading his words and I'm like amazed at the technology and the world that he thought of before I was even alive. And
Hmm.
like, that definitely super inspiring because I was like, that's so cool. What if you could do that for someone? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And the legacy that, you're able to leave as a writer too, that, people, could very easily be reading your words far in the future, right?
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about the inspiration behind Umbra, being part of your background and that sort of thing. Was there anything else that kind of inspired you to write this story in particular?
For this one, I think it's like, so the other part I would say about it was I really did want to explore there's some themes that I wanted to explore in it. And so kind of the characters and some of the things that they go through in their background were very intentionally chosen, because I wanted to look at what it would look like. There is this conflict for all of the point of view characters dealing with what they want for themselves versus what society or family or other obligations want for them.
Okay.
And so I think that was another big piece that definitely comes through. And I don't know if I really realized it when I was writing that it was all the POV characters, just different issues that they were facing. So that was something I wanted to explore.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think I included this in the questions, but can you tell me a little bit about the characters? You said there were three point of view characters.
Yeah. So Skyla is the main character, and she is the ex-Navy captain. She's an ace pilot, and she is a alien tech salvager now in a culture that you're not supposed to go outside of the boundaries of the UTA. And so
Hmm.
to go and scavenge old world tech on these dead worlds is on the edge of the law. Um, and then Hinata, that is the main male point of view, and he is a rule following commander who has been disgraced and sent to this backwater space station to until he can redeem himself. And their paths collide when an alien virus takes out Skyla's ship, and she ends up on his space station. So they obviously have very conflicting views.
Hmm.
And then the third point of view is Freya, and she is an admiral, but she has a alternate allegiances outside of the UTA and some conflict around upholding what she knows is right versus what she's being asked to do.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't ask you this, but I don't know if you plot or if you pants your stories. But did you know that there were three point of view characters when you started, or did one kind of like materialize as you were writing?
So I was a pantser when I started. I would say I'm a plantster. So
Okay.
now I do have rough plot points, but we kind of figure out how we're getting there together. I did know there was three point of view characters. The one that I knew best when I started was Skyla, and then the one that I knew second best was Hinata. It took me the entire story to get to know the entire first draft to get to know Freya,
Hmm.
and so she definitely grew through the editing process because I knew her place in the story, but I didn't really know her very well until
Hmm.
I drafted the whole thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that it's
Yeah.
amazing how that happens. You get to the end of the story and you kind of realize, oh, this is who you are, and then you kind of have to go
Yeah.
back and build on them later. Yeah, it's a
Yep.
kind of a weird experience. Really, I've had that experience too, where I get to the end of the writing process, I'm like, oh, and you're just as surprised as the reader at that point. So you kind of have to go back and fill in what you've done, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and with the Plancer thing, I'm the same way. I try to outline, and it never goes the way I plan it. But at some point too, if I just straight up pants, I get to a point where I don't know what to do, and I've got to kind of plan at least a few chapters at a time. Otherwise, I'm kind of off in the weeds, and I have to rewrite a bunch of words, and I don't like doing that.
I haven't been there yet, luckily,
Hmm.
but I think I was very lucky that Umbra didn't go that way because I think partway through I realized I better decide where we're going. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
And you said it's a trilogy, correct? That's the plan?
Yeah, that's the plan. Book two is 30% drafted and it's plotted as much as I plot. And book three is roughly plotted in my head.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. And is it one continuous story or is it kind of episodic?
It is, so there is a main story arc that goes through the three, but then there are focuses for each of the books. So that you do feel like you get some sort of resolution with each one,
Mhm.
even though the entire storyline does go through the three.
Awesome. Really exciting. So tell us a little bit about the universe that you created. Is it, future? Is it a future Earth society or is it a secondary world? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it is roughly 10,000 years in the future after the exodus of Earth that was, where humanity left Earth. There was a 10,000-year wandering period where we were nomads and we almost died out. And now we're at a point where we have settled in a new galaxy.
Cool. That sounds super interesting. Um, and
Yeah.
so, can you tell us a little bit more about the society that exists currently, as far as the novel is concerned?
Yeah, so there are 12 tribes of humanity. The idea behind that, I actually looked at current space budget to decide what those might look like,
Okay.
if those trends continued.
Hmm.
Um, and then it is a militaristic society, so all high houses do send their candidates at 10 years old to military academies, and then they do serve in the Navy. I believe it's until they're 25. And then you can choose whether you continue conscription or you retire from the Navy at that point. Um, yeah, and then the United Tribal Axis, that is a newer governing body. And so there is also, you see some kind of classism between the high houses of the traditional tribes versus like the new civilian population and the governing bodies. So there is kind of some conflict there between the way things have always been versus kind of this new society that has come, and that's where some of the tension comes as well.
Okay. Cool. I
Yeah.
love I love how when you said that you looked at the current program and extrapolated the future from there, and I think that's a great way to look at the future and kind of imagine what the result of these specific changes could result in, right?
Yeah, I think it's a fun way to go.
Yeah. Did you do a lot of research into that sort of thing, or or how did that look for you?
So I did quite a bit of research for Umbra just because I like to learn.
Hmm.
So I did listen to two of Neil deGrasse Tyson's books so that I had like a general grasp of astrophysics. So hopefully it's somewhat sound.
Yeah.
Um, I listened to Quantum Steampunk, so that is a introduction to quantum mechanics, and
Okay.
it's really fun because she presents it in like with fictional steampunk characters,
Hmm.
these quantum mechanic principles,
Okay.
which makes it a
Cool.
little bit more digestible for
Absolutely.
people that aren't in the field. And then I listened to a book on like medieval politics because I wanted it to feel real, like the kind of the conflicts between the tribes. And then I also listened to a Norse mythology book, the one by Neil Gaiman,
Okay.
because there are one of the tribes. It is kind of descended from a Norse culture.
Yeah. A little bit of
Yeah,
everything. I love it.
yeah.
Did you have any difficulty in creating the universe?
I I don't think so. I
No?
really
Okay.
like the world building and thinking
Yeah.
about it and thinking about how things will come together. So that part was mostly fun. I'll say the part I'm not so good at is names. I do that last.
Okay.
Like in my draft, everything is just XXX, so I can
Yeah.
come through and name it
Same.
later.
Yeah, I do that too. I've got
Yeah.
the character names down, but if I need a
Yeah.
place, it's yeah XXX. I'll like figure that out
Me
later.
too.
Totally the same way. Absolutely. Even
Yep.
going through now, like I'm currently in the drafting process through my own drafting, and I'm still doing it. I'm like, I'm not ready for a name here yet. We'll figure it out before it
Yep.
gets shipped. Yeah. Um, so, what can readers expect as they read your book? What kind of emotional impact do you think it'll have on them as they read?
Yeah. It's so, I mean, obviously it does have, I think, a strong plot that's thought out and it has the foreshadowing and it's setting everything up for the series, but it's also very character driven. So you do get very emotionally involved with the characters. And based on beta reader feedback, there's one character you won't like very much until probably pretty late in the game until you really understand their motives.
Hmm.
There's others that people really like. And what's been fun is it's been different characters for actually like I think almost everybody, which is really fun. So yeah, I think that there is a character that most readers will identify with, which and it might be different characters, which I think is really fun.
Yeah.
And I think there's also things you won't expect. I know I got messages at the end about like I'm messaging you right now with tears in my eyes, and I want to go back and start the book from page one. So yeah, it should deliver emotionally. I hope.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
fun thing about multiple POVs is that everyone seems to have their favorite that they like to follow.
yeah,
But it's I think it's I mean it's great. It speaks well that you have a character that people don't like to start out with, and they get to learn the character as the story progresses, and then end up liking them in the end. Because I think that just really shows the complexity of a character. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. Um, so your the book as we're recording this comes out in a month from now, end of April. Is that right?
yeah. April 24th.
April 24th. Okay. So
Yeah,
you're in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign right now for the book. By the time this airs, it'll probably be over. But can you tell me a little bit more about running the Kickstarter and why you decided to run it as a Kickstarter before the release?
yeah. So I was really inspired by another author, E.A. Hendricks.
Okay.
She did Suspended in the Stars, which was a debut YA sci-fi
Hmm.
on Kickstarter.
Okay.
Um, it caught my eye there. I backed it. I loved it. It was a great book. And I was really impressed by her campaign. And I thought that'd be really cool to do for Umbra.
Hmm.
A couple things that I think would be really cool to come out from it is, we're making these special editions, which I think are kind of hard to do for indie authors outside of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for those, that there's going to be these really pretty editions of Umbra out in the world and on my bookshelf. And if we hit our super stretch goal, we're going to make an audiobook. So
Oh.
that's what I really want to do, but there's a lot to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I definitely want to put it in that format. And hopefully this puts us a step closer to doing that sooner.
Yeah, for sure. And how have you found the
Yeah.
process so far? Because, like I said, we're partway into it, but it's doing quite well.
Yeah, I think it's been fun. I've never done one,
Mhm.
so I don't necessarily know what to expect. Again, I've funded or backed I've backed several, right? So I can watch and see what's going on, and I think they're
Yeah.
really fun.
Hmm.
Um, but the process has been great. It's a lot, like it's fairly overwhelming, especially when you're also in your final edits.
Yeah.
Um, but also, it's really encouraging. I mean, it's pretty cool as a debut author to see that there is interest in your book and that people do want to buy it and read it and are excited about it. So I think
Hmm.
that part that's been really fun and validating about running the Kickstarter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to be, running a successful Kickstarter campaign before the book even comes out, um, as a debut author, I think is incredible. And so congratulations on your success with it so far. Because a lot of debut authors don't, because readers aren't sure if they haven't read your work
Yeah.
before, they're not sure. So as a debut author, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. No, that was my thought as well. I was like, Thanks for believing in me, guys, because I know you haven't read the book yet.
Yeah, I mean, but you have a
Yeah.
great sounding premise. The cover looks amazing, so I think that
Yeah.
speaks to to your target audience, and I think definitely the interest is there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you did mention before, and I do want to touch on it just a bit because I'm a cyclist as well. But I saw on Instagram that you are a cyclist. Can I ask you a little bit more about your background in cycling and kind of what that looks like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I love cycling,
Yeah.
so I'm definitely interested to hear kind of what your jam is in cycling too, because there is different things people gravitate towards, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm a road cyclist. I'm pretty like amateur, just like pretty easygoing with it. I've done a few fondos just kind of locally in my area and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's just a hobby for me. So I'm not sure how intense you are with it or whatnot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, like right now, less intense, obviously, because of the book.
Hmm.
I actually dealt with injuries over the past 2 years, which maybe
Okay.
contributed to giving me more time to write this book.
Yeah.
In the fall, I couldn't write at all. I had to take like a month off or something like that. But yeah, I've been riding bikes for like 13 years. That's actually
Awesome.
how I met my husband. We were both on the university cycling team.
Cool.
So that's something we still do together. We race everything from criterium to Lodija. So for people who aren't familiar, Lodija is a 1 day classic in the US. It's 200
Okay.
miles from Logan to Jackson, Wyoming,
Oh wow.
over 3 mountain passes with 10,000 feet of elevation gained. That is one of the hardest things I've ever done.
I
I've done it
bet.
twice,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's a tough race.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a fondo is the furthest I've gone. That's 160K. I don't know what that translates into miles. But yeah, so that's incredible. Yeah, I got to start probably about 10 or so years ago, 10 or 12 years ago as well. And we just did a ride from Jasper to Banff in Alberta through the mountain pass there. And that
That
was
sounds
kind of
cool.
that was my introduction to cycling. So it was,
That sounds hard.
it was hard, especially for a beginner, because I also,
Yeah.
at the time, I was living in a place without any hills. So I was just doing flat road training, and all of a sudden we're into the mountains. And yeah, it was a tough time. I've said I'd like to go back and do it now that I'm in a place more with more hills that I can do some training on. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes
Um,
a difference.
it really does. But I do hear you about the writing time and writing, because it's so hard to have like different hobbies that both require a lot of time. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Last
the what I
summer.
do
Oh, sorry.
though,
Go ahead.
so like what I do though is like I'll think through story plots while I'm biking.
Mm.
So like a lot of times then when I sit down to write, I already know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, so that's how I don't know. That's how I find the time for both is like I'm like this is time for me and I just get to think.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good way
Yeah.
to do it too. And I have you tried dictating at all? That might be a bit difficult on a bike, but
Yeah, I don't think I could do it on a bike. I don't know
probably
if
get
I'd
too
be
much.
good at it.
Yeah, you probably get too much wind noise. Now that I
Yeah.
think about it, that would be probably not work out so well. But yeah,
Yeah.
last summer I didn't get a lot of biking in because I was working on my last. It ended up being 2 bucks, and it just took way more time than I wanted. So this year I planned for a
Yeah.
July release for a book I've already got pretty much done, because I want to be able to dedicate some more time to being on the road this year.
Yes, it's a good plan. I know.
Yeah.
That's why Umbra's coming out in April,
Hmm.
right? So then I can bike in the summer and then I'll, wrap up book two in the fall, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Do
Yeah.
you have any races coming up or anything?
So I'll probably do the criterium. There's criterium, what are they called? Tours, where they do them every week. So I'll do
Okay.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there'll be some road races for sure, like 30 to 50 miles. I don't think I'm going to do anything more than 100 miles this year.
Okay.
It's a lot of time in the saddle for training. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm hoping to get a couple in this year, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, what can readers expect from you next? You've got the next two books in the trilogy coming out. What's kind of your timeline for those? And then, do you have anything else on the back burner?
Yeah. So my plan is to release one book a year for the Ascension Stars trilogy. I really hope I can keep that pace because I think that would be really nice for everyone.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely don't think I can go faster than that though. And then I do have a YA fantasy 70% drafted. I wrote
Okay.
that one for my son. It was supposed to be like a little novelette for fun, and it
Mhm.
turned into like a full novel.
That's awesome.
But it's been a fun break from the sci-fi. It's a lot fantasy for me at least is a lot easier as far as like I don't know. You can just write and you don't have to make sure that like all the science and all of the
Yeah.
everything works the same way. So it was kind of like a nice little break when I needed to step away from Umbra during editing and let my brain rest.
Right.
So yeah, I'd like to wrap that one up. I don't know, somewhere in there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you've got your trilogy and then a couple of side projects in between. It's a good way to
Yep.
do it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So Amber, this is the greatest podcast in the multiverse. Can you tell me how in a parallel universe another decision might have influenced a different version of your life?
Yeah, this one, that's a deep question.
It can be as deep or as
um,
fun as you want to make it. That's the beauty of it.
yeah. Well, so it's funny because there is one moment in my life that I do feel like shaped who I am.
Okay.
And so if I had made a different decision then I do think I'd be a different person. So when I was 14, I decided I wanted to join the wrestling team.
Okay.
And I was very shy and I was a little girl and there was no girls on the team. So the first day I showed up at practice, like I was terrified. And like the one of the scariest things I mean, I still remember how I felt to this day, like taking that first step onto the mat and like being like, I can do this. And it's an incredibly hard sport.
Yeah.
It's a very physically hard sport. And so that taught me that I could do hard things,
Right.
that I could do, and I've used that throughout the rest of my life of, if you could take this, you could do this one hard thing, you could do the next hard thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome, and good for you. Like that's that's amazing, and that you were able to take that experience and use it for everything else you've done since then. Um, because it's not easy. I mean, as a teenager, looking at those boundaries and seeing like this is something really difficult that I don't know if I can do, but sticking through it and doing it anyway can really shape who we
Yeah,
are.
for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Amber, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media and how they can get a hold of your book?
Yeah. So my handle on all the social media is Amber Ray Toro. It's RAE. And that's across the board. My website is ambertoro.com, which is, I guess, easier to remember. And at the point that this is coming out, you'll probably be able to get my book on my website, Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, wherever books are sold.
Awesome. Cool.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I had a lot of fun chatting with you, and I'll be sure to link everything in the show notes for people to find there.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse. As well, you can help support the show by supporting me on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can get early access to the show, as well as submit your questions for my upcoming guests. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.